What if your deepest wounds could actually become your greatest strengths? So today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of Dr. Lane Lasater. He's a clinical psychologist whose own very personal battle with childhood trauma and alcoholism became the bedrock of his life's work. Now, this isn't just a story about getting better. It's really a roadmap for turning pain into purpose. Okay, this quote, this is pretty much the heart of Dr. Lasater's whole message, and it's the big idea we're going to unpack. For him, this isn't just some nice, fluffy sentiment. No, it's a truth he actually lived. It's a promise that came directly from his own journey through some really dark times. So you might be wondering, why share a story that's so personal? Well, it really comes from a place of deep gratitude. Dr. Lasater wants to pass on everything he learned, both as a therapist and in his own life, to anyone out there who might feel trapped by a difficult past.
To really get how he became a healer, we first have to go back and understand the wounds. His journey kicked off in a childhood that was just filled with intense conflict, and that's where he first felt that impulse to try and fix the pain that was all around him. His childhood was this real paradox. On one hand, there was genuine love, there was joy, but all of that existed right alongside this deep, deep hurt and terrible conflict. His parents were caring, for sure, but they were also wounded people themselves, and that mix created a home just filled with emotional contradictions. So right in the middle of all this chaos, he takes on the role of the helper. As a little kid, he would actually try to intervene to fix his parents' fights, but when he couldn't, and of course he couldn't, that feeling of being helpless, that frustration, it just curdled into rebellion and this deep-seated anger that he ended up turning inward on himself. And all that internal turmoil, it pushed him toward a really dangerous way of coping. His relationship with alcohol started hard and fast, with a blackout when he was just 18. And for the next 14 years, he was basically living a double life, discovering this incredible passion for psychology during the day while depending on alcohol to numb the loneliness and depression at night. Every recovery story has a turning point. And for Dr. Lasater, it wasn't some big, dramatic crash. Nope. It was a quiet, deeply uncomfortable evening that would change the entire course of his life. It was the moment that the past he'd buried for so long finally decided to come to the surface. So picture this. The scene is a goodbye party. He's surrounded by his colleagues, people he really looks up to, wise, compassionate professionals. It's a cool summer evening, there's wine, and as the night wears on, the conversation eventually drifts towards family. And then he does something he has never done before. He decides to share this little piece of his secret past, but he packages this really traumatic memory from his childhood as if it's some kind of funny story. He's trying to make light of it, hoping his friends will just laugh along with him. But they didn't laugh. There was only silence. And in that silence, all the shame that he had carried for so long just came crashing down on him. He instantly regretted opening his mouth, feeling completely exposed, realizing he had just revealed the one thing he was terrified would make him unworthy of his chosen career. That one moment of silence led to this massive realization. His past was unfinished. It all clicked. He understood that all his professional training, all his knowledge, it meant nothing if he hadn't dealt with his own pain first. To truly become a healer, he had to start by healing himself. So that painful awakening, that was the catalyst. It was the exact moment he stopped running from his past and finally took that first crucial step on the path to recovery. His recovery started with a series of really deliberate, concrete actions. He found a therapist who, right away, confronted him with the truth about his drinking. And here's the key part. He accepted it. He didn't fight it. And that acceptance led him to stop drinking and get into a treatment program where he could finally, truly face the trauma from his childhood. This statement is so simple, but man, is it powerful. It marks the definitive line in the sand. It's the day his old life ended and his new one began. Sobriety wasn't something he negotiated with. It was a decision, and it was that decision that unlocked the door to everything that came next. But here's the thing, right? Stopping drinking was just the first step. Like he says, he still had miles to go. Taking away the anesthetic of alcohol meant that all the emotions he had been pushing down for years started to wake up. Now, the real, difficult work of processing all that pain could finally begin. This next phase of his healing, this is where things get really interesting. it led to this profound shift in his whole perspective. He began to see not only himself differently, but also the very people at the source of all his pain, his parents. Another huge milestone in his healing actually happened years into his sobriety. He was listening to a talk by a Dr. Claudia Black, and her words just unlocked this flood of grief that he hadn't fully processed. It was a shattering experience, but on the other side of that grief, he found a sense of peace he had never known before. And as that sadness started to fade, something truly remarkable happened. It transformed into this deep compassion for his parents. He started to see them not as the villains of his story, but as wounded people themselves who were caught in this generational cycle of unfinished emotional business and destructive family patterns. This new compassion allowed him to find what he calls resources within the hurt. He started to see that, alongside all the pain, his parents had actually given him these incredible gifts: his mother's kindness, his father's amazing work ethic, a deep belief in education. He realized these strengths were actually forged in the very same fire as his trauma. So, what did this healing process actually look like in practice? Well, first, it was about focus. Instead of getting completely overwhelmed by everything that was wrong, he learned to tackle his problems just one at a time, starting with whatever was most pressing. It's a simple strategy, but it's so powerful. Next, he realized recovery had to be holistic. Sobriety was the starting line, sure, but alcohol wasn't his only escape. He had to address his other addictions and really, fundamentally, learn how to care for his own health. True healing wasn't just about removing the negative stuff, it was about building a positive, healthy life for his whole self. And this led to the most powerful transformation of all. He completely reframed his entire story. The struggles, the pain, they weren't just sources of shame anymore. They became the very source of his compassion and his effectiveness as a healer. He understood the fight because he had lived it himself. And that right there, that is the ultimate lesson of his entire journey. And it brings us right back to that message of hope he started with. It's this profound idea that our deepest wounds don't have to define us or defeat us. With hard work, support, and compassion, we can actually transform our most troubled patterns into our greatest sources of strength and wisdom. Dr. Lasater's story really proves that healing is possible, that our past doesn't have to dictate our future. And so it leaves us with a pretty big question for our own lives, doesn't it? How can we begin the work of transforming our own troubled patterns into our greatest sources of strength?